When Elvis Presley walked through the gates of Fort Chaffee, Arkansas on March 24, 1958, he wasn't wearing his signature pink shirt or driving his Cadillac. He was wearing the same olive green uniform as every other recruit, carrying the same duffel bag, following the same orders. The king of rock and roll had just become US 53310761, Private Presley, and what happened over the next 72 hours would test everything Elvis believed about himself, force him to choose between the man he was and the icon he'd become, and ultimately reveal a side of Elvis that the world had never seen before. But nobody at Fort Chaffee knew yet that this wasn't just about one famous recruit joining the army. This was about whether Elvis Presley could strip away the fame and prove he was more than just a name on a marquee. March 1958. America was at the height of the Cold War. The draft was pulling young men into military service, rich or poor, famous or unknown. If your number came up, you went. And when Elvis Aaron Presley's number came up in December 1957, the world watched. The Army offered him an out. Join Special Services, they said. Entertain the troops. Keep making music. You'll still serve your country. It was the smart choice that would protect his career. Elvis said no. I want to serve like everyone else, he told Colonel Parker, his manager. I want to be a regular soldier, Parker argued, begged. But Elvis was adamant. He'd grown up poor in Tupelo, Mississippi. He knew what it was like to be regular people, and he refused to forget. So on March 24, 1958, Elvis arrived at Fort Chaffee. Hundreds of reporters, photographers, and fans had descended on the base. Flashbulbs popping, reporters shouting. Elvis tried to smile, but you could see the fear in his eyes. A drill sergeant pushed through the crowd. Sergeant William Norwood, a 20-year Army veteran. He looked at Elvis with mild annoyance mixed with authority. "Presley?" he barked, his voice cutting through the noise. "Yes, sir," Elvis said, his southern politeness kicking in automatically. "Drop the sir. I work for a living. It's Sergeant. You understand, boy?" Elvis blinked. Nobody had called him boy in years. Nobody had spoken to him like that since before he was famous. "Yes, Sergeant? Good. Now get in line with the rest of the recruits. You're not special here. You're just another soldier. You got that?" "Yes, Sergeant." And just like that, Elvis Presley stopped being Elvis Presley. He became US 53310761, Private. E1, the lowest rank in the United States Army. No different from any other scared kid who'd just been drafted. The processing began. Medical examination first. Elvis stood in line with 40 other recruits, all stripped to underwear, shivering. The other recruits stared. The Army doctor checked him efficiently. "Any medical conditions?" the doctor asked. Elvis could have mentioned his insomnia, his anxiety. He could have used those to get lighter duty. "No, Doc, I'm healthy. Next stop, haircut." Elvis's hair was iconic. Jet black, perfectly styled, swept back in the signature look that had become his trademark. It was as famous as Elvis himself. The barber's chair sat surrounded by photographers documenting this historic moment. Elvis sat down. The barber picked up his clippers. "You ready, son?" Elvis looked at his reflection one last time. At the hair that symbolized rebellion and rock and roll. Then at his mother, Gladys, standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "I'm ready," he said quietly. The clippers buzzed. With swift strokes, the barber shaved Elvis's head to regulation length. The famous hair fell in clumps. With each pass, Elvis the icon disappeared, leaving just Elvis the man. When it was over, Elvis stared at his reflection. He looked different, younger, more vulnerable. Without his hair, he was just a 23-year-old kid from Mississippi. "How do I look, Mama?" Elvis asked softly, turning to face Gladys. She was openly crying now, not bothering to hide her tears. "You look like my boy, my sweet boy. Not the famous singer, just my Elvis." And in that moment, something shifted inside Elvis. Without the hair, without the flash, without the fame, he was still himself. Still the same person underneath. The persona he'd built was just that, a persona. And maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to figure out who he really was underneath it all. But here's what nobody knew yet, and what would make this experience so transformative. Elvis wanted this, desperately. He wanted to be treated like everyone else. He wanted to prove he wasn't just a pretty face who could wiggle his hips and make teenage girls scream. He wanted to show the world, and maybe more importantly himself, that he was a man of substance and character. Uniform distribution came next. Elvis stood naked with other recruits as clerks handed out standard gear: olive green fatigues, combat boots, underwear, socks, everything identical. Elvis put on his uniform, struggling with unfamiliar buttons. It was too big in some places, too tight in others. The fabric was rough. He looked ordinary, and somehow that felt liberating. One of the other recruits, Bobby Henderson from Alabama, approached him. "You really gonna do this? Really gonna be just another grunt?" "That's the plan," Elvis said. "The sergeant's gonna ride you harder because you're famous." "You ready?" Elvis hadn't thought about it that way. "I guess I'll find out," Bobby nodded. "My little sister's got posters of you all over her wall. It'll mean something to her that you didn't take the easy way out." Elvis felt a warmth in his chest at those words. "Tell your sister I said thanks. And tell her I'm gonna make it through this. I will. And hey!" Bobby stuck out his hand. "We're in this together now. You need anything, you let me know." Elvis shook his hand firmly. It was the first genuine moment of connection he'd felt since arriving at Fort Chaffee. Not a fan asking for an autograph, not a reporter looking for a quote. Just one soldier offering support to another. "Thanks, Bobby. Same goes for you." And that's when everything changed. Because the real test wasn't the haircut, or the uniform, or even the fear of what basic training would bring. The real test came that first night in the barracks, when Elvis Presley had to sleep in a room with 50 other men and prove he could be just one of the guys. The barracks at Fort Chaffee were standard military. One long room with rows of metal bunk beds, thin mattresses, scratchy blankets. No privacy, no luxury. 50 men crammed together. Elvis was assigned a top bunk. He climbed up, exhausted, and lay down. His mother was sick. He'd known it for months. Gladys had looked terrible today, and he couldn't do anything except serve and pray. "Hey, Presley." A voice came from the bunk below his, breaking through his dark thoughts. "You awake up there?" "Yeah," Elvis answered quietly. "Can't sleep either, huh? First night's always the hardest, they say." "Yeah, I guess so." There was a pause, then the voice continued. "I'm Williams, Corporal Williams. I'll be one of your instructors for basic training. Just got transferred here from Fort Hood last month." Elvis leaned over the side of his bunk to look down. He could just make out the shape of a man in his late 20s lying on the bottom bunk. "Nice to meet you, Corporal." "Look, I'm gonna level with you because I think you deserve to know what you're in for. The next 8 weeks are gonna be hell for everyone. That's just how basic training works. It's designed to break you down and build you back up as a soldier. But it's gonna be extra hell for you because you're famous. I figured as much. No, I don't think you understand how bad it's gonna be. Every drill sergeant in this place is gonna want to prove they can break Elvis Presley. Every single one of them is gonna be watching you, looking for any sign that you think you're special. And the brass, the officers, they're gonna want to parade you around for PR purposes whenever they get the chance. You're gonna be pulled in 50 different directions." Elvis absorbed this information, feeling the weight of it settle on his shoulders. "So what do I do?" "You keep your head down and your mouth shut. You work harder than everyone else. You never complain, never ask for favors. Show them you're tough. Show them you belong here. That's the only way you're gonna earn their respect." "I can do that," Elvis said, with more confidence than he felt. I know you can. I saw you today during processing. You could have made a scene about the haircut, could have demanded better quarters. But you didn't. You took it all like a man. That impressed me. If you keep that attitude, you'll make it through. Elvis felt something loosen in his chest. Thanks, Corporal. I really appreciate you telling me all this. Get some sleep, Presley. Reveille's at 500 hours, and trust me, you're gonna need all the rest you can get. The next morning came brutally early. At exactly 5 a.m., the overhead lights snapped on with blinding brightness, and Sergeant Norwood's voice boomed through the barracks like a foghorn. Up and at 'em. You got exactly 5 minutes to get dressed. Make your bunks to military standards and be outside in formation. Move, move, move! Total chaos erupted. 50 men scrambling out of bed simultaneously, pulling on uniforms with fumbling fingers, trying to remember which boots were theirs in the confusion. Elvis moved as fast as he could, but he'd never made a bed to military standards before in his life. His first attempt was an absolute disaster. Sergeant Norwood walked past, took one look at Elvis's pathetic effort, and without a word, ripped the entire thing apart. "That's pathetic, Presley," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You make your bed like that again, and you'll be doing push-ups until your arms fall off." "Fix it! Now!" Elvis fixed it. It was better the second time, but still not good enough. Around him, other recruits were having the same problem. They were all just scared kids trying desperately not to screw up on their first morning. Outside, the morning air was cold and damp, the sun not yet risen above the horizon. The recruits stood in what was supposed to be formation, but looked more like a disorganized mob, all of them shivering in their new uniforms, waiting nervously for instructions. Sergeant Norwood walked slowly up and down the line, inspecting each man with obvious displeasure. "You maggots look like hot garbage," he announced. "Absolutely pathetic. But that's okay. By the end of 8 weeks, I will transform you pathetic civilians into United States soldiers. And you—" He stopped directly in front of Elvis, standing so close their noses were almost touching. "You think you're ready to be transformed, Presley? Or do you think you're too special for this?" Every single eye in the formation turned to Elvis. This was the moment. This was where he either proved himself or failed spectacularly. Elvis stood at attention, looking straight ahead, and said in a voice that was steady and strong, "I'm ready, Sergeant. No special treatment. I'm here to serve like everyone else." Sergeant Norwood studied him for a long moment, his eyes searching Elvis's face for any sign of insincerity. Then, almost imperceptibly, he gave a small nod. "We'll see about that. Drop and give me 50 push-ups. Right now." Elvis dropped to the cold ground without hesitation, started doing push-ups. His arms burned after 20. His chest ached after 30. By 40, his whole body was shaking with the effort. But he didn't stop. He kept going. 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. He stood back up, breathing hard, sweat already forming on his forehead, despite the cold morning air. "Not bad, Presley," Sergeant Norwood said. Then he turned to address the entire formation. "Now everyone else, 50 push-ups. All of you. Because if one man in this unit screws up, you all pay for it. That's how the Army works. You're not individuals anymore. You're a unit. You succeed together or you fail together. Now drop!" And just like that, Elvis Presley learned his first real lesson in military life. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about the team, the unit, the greater good. The rest of that first day continued with brutal efficiency. Physical training that left everyone gasping and sore. Weapons instruction where they learned to field strip and reassemble an M1 rifle. Marching drills where they practiced moving in formation until their feet ached. Classroom lectures on military code of conduct. Every single minute was scheduled. Every action was controlled and supervised. There was absolutely no room for individuality, no space for ego, no tolerance for celebrity, and amazingly, Elvis loved it. For the first time in years, nobody cared that he was Elvis Presley. Oh, they knew who he was. That was impossible to hide or ignore. But out here, in the mud and sweat and exhaustion of basic training, it didn't really matter. What mattered was whether you could keep up during the runs, whether you could follow orders, whether you had your buddies back when things got tough. During lunch, bland cafeteria food served on metal trays, Elvis sat with Bobby Henderson and a few other recruits at a long table. They ate in exhausted silence for several minutes before one of them finally spoke up. "So, what's it actually like?" asked a kid from Ohio named Miller, looking at Elvis with genuine curiosity. "Being famous, I mean. Is it everything people think it is?" Elvis chewed his food slowly, considering the question carefully. "It's complicated. The music part is great. The performing, connecting with audiences. That's what I love. But the rest of it, the screaming fans everywhere you go, the photographers following you constantly, people thinking they know you just because they've seen you on TV, that part's really hard. You stop being a real person and start being a product. And after a while, you forget who you really are underneath all of that. Is that why you didn't take the special services deal?" Bobby asked thoughtfully. Elvis nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so. I needed this. I needed to prove to myself that I'm more than just a guy who can sing, that I'm a real person who can do real things, that I have substance, not just talent." Miller laughed and shook his head. "Man, if my drill sergeant heard you talking like this, all philosophical during lunch, he'd probably make you do another 50 push-ups just on principle." They all laughed at that. And in that moment, Elvis felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Normal. Like he was just one of the guys. Not the king of rock and roll. Just Elvis. The weeks passed in a blur of exhaustion. Long marches, obstacle courses, endless drills. Elvis struggled like everyone else, but never complained. Never asked for special treatment. When other recruits struggled, Elvis helped them. But wait, you haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Because about halfway through basic training, one specific incident would cement Elvis's reputation in his unit and prove once and for all that he was truly one of them. They were on a 20-mile forced march with full combat gear, hiking through the Arkansas wilderness in brutal summer heat. Everyone was completely exhausted, dehydrated, barely able to put one foot in front of the other. The sun beat down mercilessly. The packs on their backs felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Every step was agony. About 15 miles in, Bobby Henderson just collapsed. Went down hard, unconscious before he even hit the ground. Heat exhaustion. His body had simply given out. Elvis was marching directly behind Bobby when it happened. Without even a second's hesitation, Elvis dropped to his knees beside his friend, immediately checking his pulse and breathing like they'd been trained to do. Bobby was alive, but in bad shape. His pulse was racing. His skin was hot and dry, his breathing shallow. "Medic!" Elvis yelled as loud as he could. "We need a medic over here now!" While waiting for the medic to arrive, Elvis took off his own canteen, his precious water that he desperately needed himself, and poured it over Bobby's head and neck, trying to cool him down. He loosened Bobby's uniform collar, elevated his feet slightly, did everything he'd been taught in their first aid training. The medic arrived within a minute, quickly assessed Bobby's condition, and called for a transport truck. As they were loading Bobby onto a stretcher, Sergeant Norwood walked over to where Elvis was still kneeling in the dirt, his own exhaustion forgotten in his concern for his friend. "Presley," Norwood said, his voice neutral. "You could have kept marching. Henderson's not your responsibility. You could have let someone else handle it." Elvis looked up at him, sweat pouring down his face, exhaustion and emotion written in every line of his body. "With respect, Sergeant, he is my responsibility. We're a unit. That's what you taught us on day one. We succeed together or fail together. We don't leave our people behind. Ever." Sergeant Norwood stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded with something that might have been approval. "Get back in formation, soldier. We've still got 5 miles to go." Elvis stood up, his legs shaking with exhaustion, shouldered his pack, and rejoined the march. Behind him, he heard one of the other recruits mutter to his buddy, "Damn, I guess he really is one of us after all." Word of the incident spread through the entire base within hours. Elvis Presley, the biggest star in America, had stopped during a grueling forced march to help a fellow soldier in distress. He'd given up his own water when he desperately needed it. He'd put the welfare of his unit above his own comfort. The officers noticed. The very next day, Colonel William Taylor, the base commander, called Elvis into his office. Elvis stood nervously at attention, wondering if somehow he'd screwed something up. "At ease, Private," Colonel Taylor said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit down. This isn't a reprimand." Elvis sat, confused but relieved. "I've been watching you, Presley," the colonel said. "I'll be honest, when you first arrived, I thought you'd wash out within a week. I thought you'd find some excuse to transfer to special services. But you haven't done that. You've stuck it out. More than that, you've excelled. Your drill sergeants tell me you're consistently one of the hardest-working recruits." "Thank you, sir. I'm not finished. The reason I called you in here is because the Army's Public Relations Department has been breathing down my neck. They want to use you for recruitment campaigns, posters, radio spots. It would mean significantly lighter duty, more time off base, better quarters. What do you say?" Elvis didn't even hesitate. "With all respect, sir, I'd prefer to continue serving with my unit. I came here to be a soldier, not a poster boy. If I take the easy assignment now, everything I've done won't mean anything." Colonel Taylor leaned forward, studying Elvis. "You realize you're turning down an opportunity that most soldiers would jump at?" "Yes, sir. But that's not why I'm here." The colonel was quiet, then smiled slightly. "You've been a model soldier, and more importantly, a good man. That matters. Your mother would be proud." At the mention of his mother, Elvis's composure cracked. "I hope so, sir. She's not well. I worry about her." "I know. If anything changes, you'll have emergency leave immediately. You have my word." Basic training ended in mid-May 1958. Elvis graduated with his class. No special recognition. The Army granted him brief leave before deployment to Germany. He went home to Memphis, to Graceland, to his mother. And what you're seeing now is just the beginning. Because what happened during that brief leave would break Elvis's heart and shape the rest of his life forever. Gladys Presley had deteriorated badly. She'd lost weight, her skin yellowish, her eyes dull. Elvis was shocked. "Mama, you need a doctor, now." "I'm fine, baby." "Tell me about the Army." So Elvis told her everything. And as he talked, Gladys smiled, proud. "You did good, baby. You showed them who you really are. That's all I ever wanted." Elvis stayed with her as much as he could. They watched TV together, ate meals, though Gladys could barely keep anything down. They talked about memories and hopes, and Elvis tried desperately to ignore the truth. In August 1958, days before Elvis was scheduled to ship to Germany, Gladys was hospitalized. Acute hepatitis, liver failure. Critical. Elvis rushed to the hospital, held her hand. "I'm not going to Germany. I'm staying with you." "No." Her voice was weak but firm. "You're going to serve your country. You're going to finish what you started. Promise me." "Mama." "Promise me, Elvis." Through tears, Elvis promised. "I'll make you proud." Gladys Presley died on August 14, 1958. She was 46. Elvis was 23. The grief was unlike anything he'd experienced. His mother, who'd loved him before he was famous, was gone. At her funeral, Elvis broke down completely. The world watched him grieve, but through the grief, Elvis remembered his promise. Finish what he started. Be the man she raised him to be. 2 weeks after burying his mother, Elvis boarded a ship to Germany. He served as a tank crewman with the 3rd Armored Division. He lived in barracks with other soldiers. He did his job without complaint, and he did it to honor his mother's memory. The Army years were hard. Germany was cold and lonely. Elvis struggled with depression and grief. He started taking pills to help him sleep and manage anxiety. The prescription drug habit that would eventually kill him started here, as he tried to cope with losing his mother. But he also grew. He learned discipline. He learned humility. He made real friends, buddies who knew him as Elvis the Soldier. When Elvis was discharged in March 1960, he returned as a different man. Still famous, but changed. Deeper. More grounded. In interviews, reporters asked about his Army experience. They expected him to talk about sacrifice, how glad he was to be back. Instead, Elvis said, "Those 2 years were some of the most important of my life. They reminded me who I am. Not the famous singer, but just a man. My mama wanted me to finish what I'd started, and I'm glad I did. I'm proud of my service. The experience shaped everything." Even as his struggles with addiction deepened, he never forgot the lessons. He always remembered he was capable of more, that he was still the kid from Tupelo, who'd proven himself as a soldier. His fellow soldiers never forgot him either. For decades, the men who served with Elvis told stories, not about the rock star, about the buddy who helped them, who shared care packages, who treated them like equals. They spoke of Elvis with genuine respect, earned through character. That's the story of Elvis's first day in the Army, and the weeks that followed, and the 2 years that changed him. It's about humility and courage and choosing to be more than what people expect. About a young man who could have taken the easy road, but chose the hard one. Elvis Presley, the rock star, will be remembered forever. But Elvis Presley, the soldier, US 53310761, Private, proved something more important. He proved that fame doesn't define character, that celebrity doesn't equal substance, that the true measure of a person is what they do when nobody's giving them special treatment. And on March 24, 1958, standing in that processing line at Fort Chaffee, getting his head shaved and his uniform issued, Elvis Presley proved he was more than just a singer. He was a man, a soldier, a person of substance who could back up the image with reality. That's the day Elvis became just another soldier, and in doing so, proved he was so much more. Tell us in the comments, do you think Elvis made the right choice refusing special services? What does true service mean to you? Could you give up fame and comfort to prove yourself? Let us know what city you're watching from today. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of Elvis Presley, the moments that tested him, and the character that defined him beyond the fame. Hit the bell to never miss a story that matters.